So welcome. Please be seated. We'll start in 30 seconds. So welcome. Nice to see a almost full room here. So my name is Sverker Holmgren. I am a professor of scientific computing at the Chalmers University of Technology, and then representing one of the hosts of this event. And I will be chairing this first session. And first of all, I would like to really wish you all a warm welcome to Gothenburg on behalf of both Chalmers University of Technology and also the Gothenburg University. And we have then a first session that we will have some welcoming presentations, of course, but rather brief. And then we will have 3 presentations discussing different perspectives of the development of research data during the last 10 years, and maybe then reflecting also on the role of the Research Data Alliance. So that's the program for today. I will do like this. I will call the presenters, the speakers, all of them up on the stage, only with first names right now. And then I will introduce them a little bit more when we come to their presentations. So we have Lars and Hillary, and then we have Madiareni, Natasha, and Wilhelm. So please join us up on the stage. So first, then I would like to say a few words, welcome, and also some practical details that might be useful for you while you're staying here in Gothenburg. So let's see if we can get this working. No. Yeah. First of all, the weather. So I don't live in Gothenburg. I actually live in another city in Sweden. So I can tell you this fact that Gothenburg is actually one of the cities in Sweden with the most rain during the year. And this is the weather forecast for this week. And you can see that, okay, this week is no exception. And we are sorry for that, but we cannot really do much about it. So, of course, a sort of idea of a giveaway for you when you come here will be an RDA umbrella. But actually, that won't probably work either, because there will also be quite a lot of wind. So the proper equipment is on the right-hand side here. And unfortunately, we could not fit that into the budget of the conference for all of you. So yeah, sorry about that. Wi-Fi access, I guess most of you have already found that already, but there is a little bit of a detail here also. So you have the Lindholmen Guest, which is the Wi-Fi of the conference center. And that is strong and good everywhere. There is also EduRoam available. Most of you might have that already, but it's weak in some parts of the conference center. So please check that if you want to get connectivity. Another important detail, practical detail, is local transportation. So there's actually a very convenient way to get into the city center from here. And many of you might have used this already yesterday, but it's a ferry. It's a free ferry going across the river, connecting the small harbor just here and the small harbor in the city center. And it's a very efficient way of traveling, for example, also to the reception later today. Note one thing, however, it stops working at 6 o'clock in the evening. So then you either have to take another ferry or you take the bus. There's a reception this evening, and you're all very welcome to that. In fact, what we saw when we organized this event was that we were overwhelmed by the amount of people actually showing up. So we have more than 500 attendees registered physically here in Gothenburg. We started with asking the mayor of Gothenburg city, can we have the reception at your house, the town hall. And okay, of course, he said, yes, that would be, you're welcome, but there it's only 300 people that can get in there because of the fire regulations, etc. And since we got a lot of registrations, many of you have not had a chance to register for a reception. So we decided to then have another venue. So we have what is called Chalmerska huset, which is close to the town hall also. And those of you that have a small glass on your badge, you're welcome to the town hall. Those of you that don't, you're welcome to Chalmerska huset. And that you're also welcome there, even if you didn't register for any reception. So everybody is welcome to a reception, but there are 2 places. And please keep track of this, because otherwise we will have a little bit of a chaos emerging. I will say just a few words about Chalmerska huset. Maybe someone will say more about Chalmers later, but that building was the home of the director and owner of the Swedish East India Company, William Chalmers. And he then donated money to create Chalmers University of Technology. And the reception this evening will be in a bank vault. And the bank was created after actually William Chalmers left. The vault is empty, and that is not because of a bank crash, it's because the bank has left. So you will be having your reception there. So I think that's about it for my presentation. And then I would like to give the word to Lars Börjesson. Lars Börjesson is a professor of physics at Chalmers University. He has also been the vice rector of research at Chalmers, and he has been the Secretary General of Swedish Research Council for Research Infrastructures, and involved still quite a lot in a number of large global or European research infrastructures, like the European Spallation Source and also the Square Kilometre Array. But what is important in this setting, I think, is that Lars was one of the main organizers of the first plenary event. That was here in Gothenburg, RDA plenary event, almost exactly 10 years ago. So I give the word to Lars.
So thank you very much, Sverker. And it's a great honor, of course, and pleasure to welcome you to this 20th RDA plenary and to Gothenburg and the city of rain and wind, as we have heard. And I have lived here all my life, so I know what it is about. And also the authorities in the city knows about that. So instead of trying, they realize that this is something that we have to live with. So I tried to make policies how to make the rain and the wind as an asset instead of some hinder for things. So I would also like to say welcome back. It's now 10 years anniversary of the RDA launch and the first RDA plenary here in Gothenburg. That was the 18th of March in 2013. The initiative actually was then formed by European, American, and Australian science organizations. The importance of this event at that time was also marked by that Nelly Cruz, the commissioner and vice president of the European Union at that time, was one of the main speakers together with representatives, of course, of the science community. And she emphasized a few things. She emphasized that open data and sharing of research data both make science better and make science better for society. That the ownership for the process for open and shared data lies with the science community, which I think is in the heart of the RDA and very important, and that the movement towards sharing data has a global dimension, and that it is an endeavor that just started at that time. Actually, I think it started much earlier, but that was a significant event in any case. I believe this summarizes the RDA mission quite well, actually. The first plenary of RDA was attended by 250 on-site participants. About 30 of them who was there at that time are here today as well, among the 500 on site. And as I understand it, there are also a few hundreds also online. At that time, there was no online session. I have then to congratulate RDA to its success over the 10 years, of course. RDA has now more than 13,000 members in 148 countries. It's impressive. It is a grassroots-driven initiative and has an inclusive approach and covers all data lifecycle stages, which I think is really at the heart of it. And it has also had enormous impact over the years. It has provided technical and social solutions for data sharing, exchange, and operability. It has provided principles that has been adopted and embraced by individuals, by projects, and by organizations. It has provided policies for data sharing globally, and which has been adopted by funding agencies and research organizations, and also a lot of inspirations to others. So congratulations for that. I have to switch here. Yeah. So there are two organizations that has also been inspired by the RDA, are the two host organizations of this event, actually. And one is the Chalmers e-Commons at Chalmers University, which I will say a few words about later on, and the Swedish National Data Service, which is hosted by Gothenburg University. And Wilhelm Widmark will touch upon that and say some words about the Swedish National Data Service. And I will say a few words about Chalmers and Chalmers e-Commons. Chalmers is a technical university with about 10,000 students and about 3,000 employees. We provide high-level education and research in technology, natural sciences, architecture, and shipping. There is close cooperation with industry, not the least at this campus, which we are at here at Lindholmen campus, and with large companies as obviously Volvo, Ericsson, SKF, and AstraZeneca, but also with small companies and startups. Actually, the incubator, Chalmers Ventures, is among the top ones in the world. We are now at Chalmers Lindholmen campus. There are two other campuses. There is the main campus, which is Johanneberg, which is on the other side of the river, close to the city center. And that's also the oldest one. And we have also a very small one, which is Onsala Space Observatory, which is 40 kilometers south of Gothenburg at the coastline. So I will say a few words about Chalmers e-Commons as well. And it's just one picture here. And about Chalmers e-Commons, which was partly inspired by RDA, actually, to some extent. And it was a bottom-up process, which started in 2016, which were aiming at a fully integrated digital support function for research data. And the implementation actually started in 2020. And e-Commons is now a user-centric support function for managing research data throughout its life cycle. And Sverker Holmgren is its director. And through Chalmers e-Commons, researchers can access a wide range of support from the center. There are three pillars in this. That's the e-infrastructure, which is access to compute and storage at several levels. That is at the local resources, the national resources, the international resources, and also some specialized resources. The second one is the digital research engineers, where you can get support from specialists in AI and machine learning, high performance computing, data management, and visualization. And then the third one is the Chalmers Data Office, where you have where you can get help with publishing research data, data management plans, making data fair, and archiving, preservation, and so on for research data. So you have all those three parts in one structure, and that's the Chalmers e-Commons. So you come in from the top as a researcher, research groups, or research infrastructures, and you can go to the Chalmers e-Commons and you can get all this kind of support from one organization. And this is also, as you see in the bottom, you can also be channeled to the national and the international resources in the world. So you can get more info about e-Commons by its director, Sverker Holmgren here. And in coffee breaks, you can get more information about SND by Willem Widmark or Max Petzold, its director, in the coffee breaks. And with that, I will just wish you a very successful 20th RDA plenary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. Thank you. And we move on to the welcome by Hilary Hanaho, the Secretary General of RDA since 2018.
That's right.
Yes.
Oh, okay, it works. Okay.
Please, Hilary.
Thank you, Sverker. Thank you, Lars, very much for the introduction and the little history lesson, which is lovely to hear. Welcome, all of you. Welcome, right?
Welcome.
Okay,
Yes.
welcome. It's so wonderful to be here. I can't see your happy faces, but I'm sure you are. And I hope you're as happy as I am and you can feel my happiness. But here we are, celebrating 10 years of the Research Data Alliance. A wonderful milestone. And thank you very much for having us back to where it all started. Actually, this was the sign. So a little bit about the road to the Research Data Alliance. If you were one of the 220 or the 30 or 50, I believe, people that are in the room that were here, you may have passed this sign on the way to the first RDA plenary. That was how you got, you knew where you were to go. But RDA, like Rome, was not built in one day. And a lot of work went into setting up the RDA. There were many people, many ideas, all back possibly before 2005, but having trawled through the plenary presentations from the first meeting, I found one. You'll see one of the pictures afterwards, slides afterwards. And there's a lot of detail, actually. I invite you to go and see them as to, you know, some of the people and the papers, the different reports and the programs that led up to the launch of RDA in 2013. But specifically, of course, the European Union, the Australian government and the National Science Foundation in the US, joined by other funders, of course, shortly afterwards, that set up these different projects in 2012. And we were able to come here on the 18th of March to launch the Research Data Alliance. This is the slide, so I'm afraid it's hard to see, but some of the people are with us here in the audience. And this is Carlos Moraes Pires, who was the European Commission project officer. And during his presentation on the 18th of March, he showed this picture with the different people who are, so we have quite a number of them actually in the audience, and you'll hear about them later on, because I think it's important for us to go back so we can go to the future. So go back to 10 years and before and hear why and what had happened at the time and how we can then build on it forward. And indeed, the underlying theme of all the plenary sessions and hopefully the activities, of course, during your breakout sessions are building partnerships for the future. So what can RDA do on behalf for you, for the community? How can we build partnerships for the future to achieve our vision and mission? And that I always like to remind everybody of the fundamentals of the Research Data Alliance. And it's really interesting as well that 10 years on, they stand the test of time, which is, I think, a testimony and to the people who set it up and who thought long and hard about what the vision of the Research Data Alliance should be, what its mission is and should have been, and the guiding principles, which I drum on about a lot if you hear me speak, but which really are the foundation and the basis on which we do our work, and you as the community do your work. I'll talk a little bit more about them towards the end. So, as I said, and it was mentioned, there were 250 people at the first event, and I think 14 working group ideas were launched here 10 years ago. And here we are today. I got a little quick sign there this morning, picture of the sign, slightly different from the paper written RDA. And thank you to some of our participants who put up these pictures. So we are 750 people between those online and those of you who have traveled here. And RDA currently has over just 102 active groups, so a rather large growth in the 10 years, and we look forward to seeing much more growth over the next 10 years. RDA wasn't built in a day, but the 20th plenary session wasn't built in a day either. And I will use the closing session to thank many people, and not least my own team. But these 4 people really need a special thanks. Sverker, Max, I can't see because it's dark, but Martin and Maria. When I asked Sverker and Max, would they be willing to take us back? They didn't hesitate and said yes. I'm not sure if you're regretting that now, Sverker. Max, but really a million thanks. And I would like you to know that RDA Foundation has planted a little forest. Well, I don't know if 100 trees, but for each of you, we have planted 100 trees. So there'll be a little forest to thank you in a small way. So there, and you will receive the details of those trees, but it was a little thank you, a small thank you for the amazing work that you've done, but I'd like to ask you to thank them, please. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Sverker. And I don't. So it's our carbon footprint, yes, no paper, nothing, we planting trees. Okay, so back to the celebrations of RDA, and of course it's 10 years, so it's happy birthday to the organization, but really it's happy birthday to all of you, because you are the organization, those of you here in the room, but also all the others online and those who aren't able to join us at all, but who contribute in many ways to this wonderful organization. When I did my first plenary as the Secretary General in 2008 in Berlin, I used a metaphor around the orchestra. And when I went back to the plenary presentations to have a look at what was said in the first plenary, I didn't realize that Carlos Morais, whose slide I showed before, also likened RDA to an orchestra. So those of you who have heard me say this before, bear with me, but I do think it really is a good metaphor for the Research Data Alliance. Because if you think of you as the community, as a very large group of musicians, and with all your skills and your competences and the knowledge that you bring to this, if you like, Research Data Orchestra. You're a collective group of instrumentalists, you like yourselves, all different, which bring, you bring your unique music, your unique sound to the table or to the concert, if you like. And I like the analogy with an orchestra because it's so in tune with the guiding principles of the Research Data Alliance. Yeah, the sound and the melody of an orchestra requires inclusivity, and we need different musicians and instruments to perform our concerts. We need different skills, experience, cultures, languages, genders that all come together. We need harmony. You need harmony in an orchestra. We need harmony in the work in the Research Data Alliance, that across all the different instruments and sounds. And of course, to play well together, you need consensus. You need to come to an agreement to allow everyone to be heard, to offer each and every musician and instrument its correct space and value and visibility in the orchestra. The Research Data Alliance Orchestra is open to everyone with any skill, any knowledge, or anything you wish to share or you wish to learn. We welcome new instruments, new musicians, and invite all to join. Our recitals, rehearsals, and concerts are non-profit, and they are open to all. And we are driven by the members of the orchestra, or RDA in the RDA terms, by the community. So while the Research Data Orchestra is hugely diverse, we share one common vision, that the researchers and innovators will openly share and reuse data across technologies, across countries, and across disciplines to address the grand challenges of society. And so you are welcome. Please enjoy the concert and the orchestra over these 3 days. I look forward, think about our theme, building partnerships for the future. I hope you enjoy the event as much as I am looking forward to it. I thank you all really very much for coming. I'm looking forward to popping in and out of all the breakout sessions. That's the only one problem with RDA. Everything runs in parallel, so you have to choose. But of course, those of you who have registered here and online will have access to the recordings through the Hoover app until the end of about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and then they'll be publicly available online, as we always do with all of our events. So I finish by saying, and I won't sing it because I don't have a great singing voice, I'm afraid, but we do I always like to say this African proverb, that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that is the motto of the Research Data Alliance. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hilary. So now we will step into the program after these welcoming speeches. And I say welcome again to everybody, and also welcome to everybody online. So we will have 3 presentations, as I said, and the topic, the idea of this is that now RDA is turning 10 years, becoming a big child, not yet a teenager with a rebellion view, but big child, 10 years. A lot of things has happened during these 10 years, not only because of RDA, of course, but some of it has a reason in an origin in our RDA work. So what we're going to hear is reflections from 3 different perspectives. So one perspective of a younger researcher, in this case from Indonesia. One perspective of a data infrastructure, in this case from Australia. And then a perspective of research performing organizations, in this case coming then from Sweden. So I will start by giving the word to Madhyareni. Madhyareni Suleiman, who is a research data librarian at the National Research and Innovation Agency in Indonesia. And she manages the Indonesian National Scientific Repository and provides support to projects, researchers in Indonesia. She has a special interest in open science and represents Indonesia in the UNESCO Open Science Working Group. Presently, you are working on your PhD in University College London. So I ask you to start this event and give the first presentation. Welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to congratulate RDA for the 10 years anniversary of connecting research data enthusiasts across the globe through novel and evolving work. Thank you, Sverker, Hilary, and RDA P20 committees for inviting me to share my thoughts as a young researcher who has also worked as a research data librarian for 10 years. I will talk about how RDA has had a great impact on the development of research data in the Global South, especially in my home country of Indonesia. What I want to articulate here is based on my own point of view, which is quite unique in this case because I'm not only an active research data librarian, but also researchers in the areas of in the field of areas RDM and open science, who needs to follow the regulations, updated regulation, and to be my own data champions. It's a challenging task, but it's rewarding because I could put myself on the shoes of researchers and see how they struggle to understand RDM practices with the current policies and new ways of doing things regarding research data. Well, my name is Madhyareni Sulaiman, but you can call me Reni. I've been a member of RDA since 2020, and as a research data librarian, it is my duty to ensure the preservation of data in the RIN Dataverse, which is Indonesia's national scientific data repository. It is set up by the Indonesian National Research and Innovation Agency called BRIN Indonesia, which is a government-based research institutions that oversees a large number of research institutes in many fields, from social science and humanities to life science and natural science. By that scale, our scientific repository does include a lot of research data and other scientific output from many fields. As a member representative from Indonesia, I also work on the UNESCO recommendation on open science development, and my team and I tried to find a way to connect the produced recommendation to Indonesia's national policy so that the two could be harmonized. I have also been a fellow of Emerging International Voices. This is a joint project of Goethe Institute and IFLA that brings together 22 young people from all over the world who work to promote libraries in their own countries. With that background and the fact that I'm still working as a research data librarian in Indonesia, I'm now obtaining a doctoral degree at University College London, where I'm focusing my research to RDM and open science and how librarians can contribute to RDM. And I then decide to become an open science enthusiast. My team and I have spent most of our time promoting RDM and open science to our researchers in Indonesia. And we have done this by giving training, consulting, and making podcasts to raise our stakeholders' awareness and knowledge of RDM. It is a nationwide movement, and that it also includes organizations that are run by people in the community. In this case, research libraries play a strategic role because we can also be involved in the research projects. For example, we work with researchers to collect data deposit in the fields for immediate data deposit, or as data curators in the deposited data set. This is still being done on small scale though, because of the limited resources that we have. In addition, I like to provide context for the distinctive evolution of research data practices in the Global South. In this slide, considering the scope of the case, I will like to concentrate on the Indonesian context. Numerous aspects of the research ecosystem has been discussed, including research data. Parallel bottom-up and top-down approaches were taken to promote the optimal research ecosystem, which include RDM. Almost all research projects in Indonesia are supported by the government, and they frequently collaborate with researchers and community members. And we believe that a decentralized system is not an effective method, as the scientific community in Indonesia is becoming increasingly aware of the importance of producing research outputs, but has minimal facilities. Mention the fact that 12% of Indonesian journal records are available in DOIJ using open journal system. And if we look at the chart here, we can see that Indonesia is one of the biggest ISSN producers among the participating countries. This means that if the research output is invested, it has the potential to promote the connection of scientific publication and research data. And by utilizing our research institution, BRIN Indonesia, which offers users an open platform, the Indonesian government has adopted a strategy that centralized but interoperable. Naturally, the outcomes take the form of national legislation that promotes the preservation of scientific community data via a mandatory deposit. But data sharing here is optional, so yeah, and in addition to community and institutional support, this national regulation have the endorsement of open science enthusiasts, science journalists, librarians, and data and information professionals. Unfortunately, not all institutions have the resources to provide services, such as sustainable data repository, which includes storage and also maintenance for sustainability. Therefore, providing and utilizing this type of open infrastructure is beneficial to the marginalized community, and in accordance with the law, national legislation that we have, the RIN Dataverse is a public resources that any Indonesian researchers can use to deposit and preserve their research data. And for some context, I believe that the country in the global north and south has its own starting point on the timeline, but they all began with the expansion of open access movement in the early 2000s. The remainder of the timeline is dynamic, depending on the approach adopted by the countries, whether it's at the community, institutional, or national level. And for the Indonesian case, we encountered trial and error, but beginning in 2010, where there was a growing awareness of and use of open journal system, resulting in an increase in scientific journals. Later, we attempted to deliver initiatives, not only focusing on research output, but also scientific publication, but also research data, as shown on the slide, which is making slow progress until national regulation implemented in 2019. And here, RDA contributes by providing an updated use case for our RDM implementation foundation. In 2020, we invited Hillary to share RDA's accomplishment at our international conference on research data, which enables us to be more proactive in exploring the approaches that the international community has taken. In tandem with the growth of deposited research data in our repository, we centralize and unified the management of government research institutions that had previously managed silos under BRIN Indonesia. And the objective is to enhance the capacity of Indonesia's research and innovation and ecosystem. We are committed to being a collaboration hub and providing an open platform that includes not only human resources, but also infrastructures, such as open labs and a network. In this instance, RIN Dataverse, our national scientific data repository, is one of the publicly accessible facilities. It is provided via ELSA, e-Scientific Services, as a centralized point. As shown on the left, we offer open laboratory facilities, including testing, analysis, measurements, calibration, etc., with all process data being deposited to our data repository as part of their research data collection and analysis. It facilitates the mobilization of data for research team, projects, and our technicians. And in addition to retrieve data, there are numerous data repositories available that cover both general and specific domains. And this RIN Dataverse is indexed by retrieve data and is the only data repository in Indonesia, whereas others are primarily common institutional repository. And the UNESCO Open Science Infrastructure Working Group also recently acknowledged our RIN Dataverse as a multidisciplinary data repository. And at the UNESCO Intergovernmental Meeting, the following Indonesian delegates drafted the recommendation on open science, which consists of a data scientist, a researcher serving as a data champion, and me also as a librarian. It is led by Mr. Hendro Subagio, the head of BRIN Indonesia's Center for Data and Information. And we are still very involved in the working group to make sure that the Indonesia's national policy matches the current conversation. In addition, we believe in the value of open data, which is why I would like to elaborate on the open data regulation that are in place in Indonesia right now. I illustrate the distinction between the two types of data by drawing parallels between research data and open data provided by the Australian government. And regarding the research data itself, we comply to the FAIR data principles. In addition, we have a specialized policy regarding open data, which is outlined in Presidential Regulation number 13/2019 about One Data Indonesia, which is part of Open Data Strategy at Open Government Partnership. And as can be seen, research institutes to provide support for open data initiatives in order to encourage reusability in terms of curated research data. And when talking about RDA's involvement in the research data in the Global South, each country has its own fascinating story to tell. And in keeping with the mission of RDA, it surely enables knowledge sharing without barriers. I, along with the person responsible for making policies in Indonesia, always revert to the curated resources that RDA provides. In order for us to learn, unlearn, and then relearn, as the figure on the slides demonstrates, all of the RDA resources has been meticulously documented, and we can also view previous engagement in the past. The adopted use case is also very useful for serving as a baseline for our recommendation regarding the development of policies. In the meantime, the approaches taken by RDA, which takes into account grassroots movements, is inclusive and offers a neutral platform on which to deliver voices, which is very much appreciated. It's helpful for me personally as a researcher and librarian to talk ideas over with the people who put them into practice, especially since Claire introduced a new community engagement program a few months ago. It most certainly raises awareness across the networks in which we are able to take an active role. When discussing research data, however, it is clear that there are still gaps and challenges that must be overcome by a great number of scientific communities and other entities, especially organizations that has existing RDM program or institutions that are still in the process of it or not yet. When we consider the policies that are provided in various institutions or countries, there are definitely some gaps that are visible, especially from the perspective of researchers. For example, GDPR or maybe Data Protection Act UK might have an effect on the way research data are managed by UK or European countries, but it won't have any effect in other countries that don't has their own data policy, which could cover sensitive data that varies across fields. When I first started my studies at UCL, I need to again learn, unlearn, and relearn how research data is regulated in UCL and the UK in general, because this regulation closely related to the research integrity of researchers. Because of this, I was also able to become more aware of how I could structure my study from the very beginning. And the second component is the infrastructure, which refers to the interoperability of how the business process of scientific output can connect the research data that is used for analysis. This can be related to how scientific output can be used. Regarding the Indonesian scenario, we are using a plugin for open journal system to connect the manuscript and also research data to the RIN Dataverse that will ensure the research data could be deposited as supplementary files alongside submitted manuscript. When scientific outputs are published, it will be another issue if there is no connection on mandatory data deposit or sharing required by journals, funders, or research performing organizations. And in addition, there are gaps in the methods by which rewards and incentives can be facilitated, which is another problem in the Global South, where funding is extremely limited. It doesn't yet facilitate research data culture, and maybe it's not yet aware of. Last but not least, given that I interact primarily with researchers from a variety of disciplines in my native country of Indonesia, I am well aware that these individuals are weighed down with loads of administrative work that requires support. It can be from research offices or libraries. There are also challenges that I, as a librarian, encountered based on this, and the challenges relate to lack of expertise and also authority and resources. how strategic position in the empowerment of stakeholders on RDM and open science implementation can be attained by libraries when considering the business process that are currently evolving to concentrate more not only on output and outcome, but also impact, in this case, reusability and reproducibility. It most certainly present a significant opportunity for libraries to participate in the open science ecosystem. And my final thought regarding the potential of RDM and data sharing practices of RDA relates to the role that RDA can play as an enabler. RDA is capable of providing a talent and resource pool for collaboration hub in terms of usage of members, information management and knowledge, co-production on standardized services and models of research data framework, for example, utilizing persistent identifier, etc. And moreover, RDA has the ability to embrace marginalized communities in order to make them more aware of RDM and data sharing. This can be accomplished through literacy programs, also professional development programs. It is especially important in addressing the gap because one of the pillars of RDA is to be more global, which we hope could engage beyond UK, EU, USA, Australia, and other developed countries. In addition, I think that collaborating with others is more effective than working on one's own, like the many slides have been shown, because of the multifaceted nature of the memory institutions, like libraries and other GLAM activities, and the function of them is to serve as source of information for general public. RDA has the potential to facilitate the empowerment of information professionals as their own unique commodity. Overall, I think it's important to emphasize this quote, which says that we are, after all, storytellers. Our goal is to give the data to have more significance, more values, and meaningful. And for the final slide, I just want to close it with, again, my wish for RDA to many more successful years ahead. Congrats once more on RDA's 10 years anniversary. Thank you, and look forward for having more conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
And the plan here is to have questions after the three presentations. So I think we move on quickly to the next presenter, which is Natasha Simons. And we move a little bit south and a little bit east from Indonesia to Australia. So you're working as Associate Director for Data and Services at the Australian Research Data Commons. And you drive national initiatives with a special focus on thematic commons. And maybe you will say one word about that in the presentation. And you have been active in RDA for quite a few years, I think, and please, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sverker, and hello, everybody. Isn't it great to actually be in the same room together? I think my last RDA was 2019, and it's just so nice to see everybody. It's really fantastic to have everybody here today, so welcome. Oh, I need the clicker. Yeah, so I'm from the Australian Research Data Commons, and we are funded by the Australian federal government through a program called NCRIS to provide Australians with competitive advantage through data. And we do that by building data infrastructure in partnership and collaboration with a really wide range of organisations and universities and so forth in Australia. So I will talk a little bit about the thematic data commons, but a little bit later in this presentation because my organisation has had a strategic shift in that direction. So I will be talking about that as I go along. A slide is missing something at the bottom there, but anyway, does anyone know how long it takes to get from Australia to Sweden? Who's not Australian, Ross? It takes over 30 hours and we leave a very hot summer behind to come to a place where even the waves are frozen. And as I arrived, I thought, you know, what was Ross Wilkinson thinking 10 years ago, Ross and Andrew, when they made that long trek from Australia to Sweden to start to contribute to the start of the Research Data Alliance? And I think, you know, it took incredible foresight, vision and leadership for Ross and Andrew and the crew then at the Australian National Data Service, which is the precursor of ARDC. It is now part of the ARDC, to actually have that vision and work with those people internationally to build the Research Data Alliance. So at that time, it was the Australian government could see that it was very important to collaborate with other countries, with Europe in particular, and with the United States, who were also looking at the data space and the importance of data. And the message came back that, you know, don't build something just for yourself in Australia, you know, where it can only really be used by Australians. Research is international. Our solutions need to be international, and the Research Data Alliance is the vehicle for that. And I think that vision has really held true, and it has future-proofed the investment that the Australian government has made in data, because the solutions that we've come up with in data infrastructure are aligned with developments internationally, and therefore aligned with research practices which are based on international collaboration. I think it's also given Australia an advantage to collaborate in RDA, which is a bit disproportionate with the size of our country. We have 25 million people in Australia. There are 746 million odd people in Europe. So to be able to collaborate through an organisation like RDA is actually quite impactful for Australia. And I think that's proven true over the time of the RDA. So one thing I hear a bit from people is it's actually really hard to convince researchers to share their data, to have open data, you know, and people get stuck down in the weeds a little bit. And I think it is worth zooming back a little bit and looking at the enormous shifts that have actually been made in the international data landscape over the last 10 years. So obviously I have not listed them all here, but back, you know, at the start of the RDA, we didn't have the FAIR data principles. Now we may all have been aiming for something similar to FAIR, but we didn't have that conceptualized in the actual principles. You know, we have had the first journal data, big journal data policies, PLOS, in 2014, actually after the RDA was established. So if you think about that, when PLOS introduced their data policy on Twitter, they had the hashtag PLOSWin and the hashtag PLOSFail, you know, and the PLOSWin was it's about time, and PLOSFail was it's my data, how dare you ask me for that. And now we're in a landscape where every major publisher, every one of the big publishers actually has a FAIR data policy. We've gone from big data to really, really big data. We've gone from worrying about USBs to worrying about the security of having data in the cloud. You know, we have government open data policies, huge increase in compute power. We now have the Research Software Alliance, and we are turning to, you know, software as a first-class research output. There are more and more standards. We've seen ORCID itself was formed, you know, around that time of, I can't remember the exact year actually, but I think it was 2011. Around that time, ORCID has grown massively, as have other international PID providers. We have more discovery portals. We even have Google Dataset Search, and now we have ChatGPT. So the landscape has changed enormously. And I think the fact that Research Data Alliance is still here is really testament to the fact that it has adapted to those changes, and it has provided a forum for people to address these new challenges in the data landscape. So that little box there is the FAIR data maturity model working group, which was set up through RDA, and there are many other FAIR focused groups, and RDA has that partnership with the Research Software Alliance. So there have also been shifts in the social environment that have also influenced the development of RDA. So COVID obviously was a big one. We all realized, oh, we're all on the same planet, and suddenly we couldn't go anywhere, and RDA had to move to the virtual plenaries, which was very difficult for everybody that particular period. We sort of have had the whole realization really that we have to do something about the environment, and you can see that research data for climate change theme back there at the RDA plenary in 2015. Also, we have a shifting organisation landscape. So I'm not sure about your organisations over the last 10 years. Do you still work for the same organisation, or is it something different now from when it started? And we have gone from the Australian National Data Service, where we went through a series of short-term government funding cycles that were quite difficult, quite challenging, the sort of 1 to 2 year government cycles, to moving and partnering with 2 other organisations, the RDS and the Nectar in Australia, to form the Australian Research Data Commons. And we now have our CEO, Rosie Hicks, who couldn't be with us today, but she is an excellent leader of ARDC, and we have actually gone from, I don't know how many staff there were in Anne's, Ross, maybe 20, 30, something like that, and we're now almost at 100 at ARDC. So the government funding has shifted. We have a 5-year funding through to 2028 now. And we have a very large big dollar co-investment programs. Okay, so what has RDA done for our infrastructure? So I think RDA first and foremost is a place to connect, collaborate, and find community. And this is a wonderful quote from Andrew Treloar, that one of the most valuable things to me about RDA is that it provides a location to meet with people who are passionate about the same issues I do and who want to make a difference in the world. And in RDA, I have found my tribe. And I think a lot of you may be able to relate to that. I know my first experience of RDA was a plenary in Denver in 2016, and I met a man called Ian Hanaskowitz, who was at that time the head of research data at Springer Nature. And he said, oh, I heard you're doing something about data policies in Australia. And I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, I want to do things about that too. And so he organised what we called a rogue birds of a feather session, because it wasn't on the agenda, in a little secret location with 25 odd people who turned up and said, yeah, we all want to do something about that too. And we formed the Data Policy Standardisation and Implementation Working Group with the sexiest name in RDA, longest name. And we went about and we thought, well, we will try to bring some standardization to journal data policies. And we ended up a few years down the track creating a master journal policy for that. But I think we got to a point in our collaboration where we didn't know each other at the start. We became co-chairs. We worked on a lot of different things together. And there was one plenary where we both sort of had come in the night before, and we had this last minute conversation about how are we going to run this session? And we were all a bit nervous about it. And the next day we pulled it off. And he was so excited, he hugged me, and Ian's very reserved. And it was quite a moment for me to have him go, yes, we did this thing. And I think, you get to the point where you can actually trust somebody completely, even though you didn't know them, because you've been working on this particular problem solving internationally through the RDA. I think another thing it's given us is a structure to address global challenges. So there are working groups, there are interest groups, there is a secretariat, there's a technical advisory board, and there are rules about, how you can form these groups to show that there is international representation. In Australia, we have a community of practice model. For example, we are interested in the assigning of identifiers to research instruments and describing them well. So we have an identifiers for instruments community of practice that's run by ARDC, and that feeds into the PEDS for instruments group in the RDA and has submitted use cases there. And the work of that group is then brought into the community of practice in Australia. I think that's been quite a good model. Another thing it's given us is outputs that can be adopted and adapted. So people may remember this in 2015, the Libraries for Research Data Interest Group produced the 23 things. Now at that time, librarians were very new to research data, but quite at the front line of providing research data support services for researchers to put their data into the repositories. And so they need a bit of help, a bit of training. And this little thing is a model where it's just 23 things where you can learn different aspects of data management that could, as a librarian, that you could use to help your researchers. And that has actually been translated into 11 different languages by the people involved in RDA, which is also testament to its success. And then in the Australian National Data Service, we took those 23 things and we turned it into a 6-month program with weekly meetups, 3 different levels of each of those 23 things, beginner, intermediate, advanced. And it was a hugely successful program that took pretty much all of the data librarians in Australia. That time was sort of over 1,500 people participated in that program. And as Michael Witt from Purdue said, he was the co-chair of Libraries for Research Data Interest Group. He said you took the 23 things and strapped it to the back of a rocket. And it just shows you can adapt the outputs really well from RDA. There are also outputs that have real world impact. So here is the one I've been involved in, creating the research data management framework for all journals and publishers. And that has really been adopted widely and has been something that's fairly significant. Now, it came out of an interest group and didn't follow quite the rules of RDA, and that it did come out of a working group, but it is a really significant piece in the data landscape because it's very difficult for researchers to comply with policies when they're all so different. And if we actually have some streamlining there, it is much easier to be able to comply with those and understand them. Also, I think RDA has the leadership, talent, resourcing, collaboration to enable really big ideas. And by this, I'm talking about Hillary and the team. This doesn't happen by magic. Sverker and everybody who's been involved in putting this plenary together, that's really important to be able to make the dreams of RDA come to fruition. And here are some examples of collaboration with other international groups for the International Data Week. So because of RDA, the Australian data infrastructure world is different, it's better. And because of the RDA, we see that world differently. It's not a competitive, hostile place. It's actually a place where we can come together with our colleagues, break bread, as they say, and get friends out of this as well. I have to say, I've met a number of people who are my friends now who I've met through RDA, just through that idea of solving problems. So I've mentioned a few data outputs, but I don't think it's one particular data output. It's not one thing, it's all of the things that RDA has provided. It's the structure, it's the plenaries, it's just that umbrella for basically enabling us to turn our big ideas into reality. So where do we go from here? I think in Australia, we have made a strategic shift to thematic research data commons. So we have one around, so these are bringing together people, skills, data, and related resources. You can see there, people, skills, storage, data models, software and compute together to solve particular problems in particularly big, thorny areas. So we have one called People Research Data Commons. So the people one is addressing health and medical aspects. We have one on planet, so that's looking at environment. We have one on HAS, Humanities, Arts and Social Science and Indigenous Data Commons. And we also have thematic data commons that are challenges. So in Australia, we get a lot of bushfires, and we have a data challenge, a thematic data challenge that is getting all the people in the room who deal with bushfire data and trying to establish a way of accessing and using that data so that we can respond to bushfires in a more efficient manner. So these have real world applications and should enable some big shifts in the Australian research environment and in Australian social and environment as well, as a result of those thematic RDCs. So the last slide is RDA. What next for RDA? So I think the fact that RDA has not only survived, but thrived over all of those years of the big changes in the data landscape and in the social landscape. I think it says really good things about the future for RDA. And I hope that it's a place that will continue to have the skills, the people, the resourcing to bring it all together and enable us to solve some of the big challenges of our time. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tack så mycket.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have had now two interesting presentations. We heard about well, the perspective of younger researchers and also the perspective of Indonesia. We heard about Australia, the infrastructure perspective. So now we turn to the perspective of research performing organizations and universities. And one thing that I really appreciate myself about RDA is that it is a grassroots movement involving the researchers, the actual researchers. So Wilhelm Widmark, the library director of Stockholm University, they have been that since 2012, so a little bit longer than the life of RDA. You're also a senior advisor for open science to the president of the university. And in this context, I think the important thing is that you're a member and driving force of the open science group of the Swedish Rectors Conference, so the Swedish universities. But you're also director of one of the directors of the European Open Science Cloud Association and a member of the European University Association group, working group on open science. So please, Wilhelm.
Thank you, Sverker. So I will have a little bit different perspective as I'm talking more top down than bottom up. So what are we doing here in Sweden within the Rectors Conference to bring together all the players in the field to put open science on the agenda? So what influences open science? It's a big movement, but it is a lot of different things that influence. And if we take the bottom down, we have the politics. It's really interesting for EU to drive open science as a question for democracy. And then we have the member states that follow EU. We have the society that is important for open science. We can bring a lot of things to society through open science. We have ethics and laws. We have research infrastructures that are building services on open science. We heard about it just lately. We have different research organizations that are taking in open science and working for it. Then we have the publishers. They build a lot of services to us on open science, and maybe they want to gain money on open science and they want to sell services to us that are very expensive, but they are still influences on open science. Then we have the founders. They mandate a lot. They mandate you to publish your data, to publish your research open access. But we often forget the researchers, and the researchers should be in the center of the discussion of open science. And it must be a moment that is both top down, but also definitely driven bottom up from the researcher's perspective. So I think we are in the middle of transformation. We have talked about open science now for many years, and there need to be a transformation. We heard about UNESCO and the open science policy from UNESCO. The EU has taken a lot of work on open science, and the governments in the different member states of Europe has done it as well. So the transition is ongoing, but we still we can't just listen to policies, we have to do things as well. So in Sweden, the transition to open access in the Swedish Research Bill 2016, they said the goal is that the transition to open access to research results, including scientific publication, artistic works, and research data should be fully implemented in a 10-year perspective. So 2026 shall, according to the Swedish government, open science be the normal. To work on that, they gave government directive for open access to the National Library, they should work on open access to articles and monographs, and the Swedish Research Council got the assignment to work on open access to research data. So it's driven through the state agencies to help open access and open data come through. But in the same time, leadership is really needed. This is the president of Stockholm University, and she says Stockholm University advocates the availability of its research and research results through a research and education environment that promotes, encourages, and informs about open science as a practice. So give open access and open science the attention they deserve. We really need this leadership from the university management to come through to get open science to become the normal. So at the Rectors Conference, where all of the universities gathered together to discuss things and work for different things in the higher education moment. So we started a group in 2016, a working group for research data. And we started to hear about EOSC and different things. Then we moved on and made a lot of service on research data, where the group now worked on the service and discussed it. And I think now Sverker is one of the members in that group as well. But the most important thing was that we started to make a roadmap for open science, how we can work together in Sweden. So in 2021, there was a roadmap that was accepted by all the universities in Sweden. How can we work together on this roadmap? And then next year, we made a guide how to implement the roadmap. As we said, we should have moved to open science in 2026. So in the guide, we say all universities should have done this by 2023 and so on. And we will have a seminar about that in a couple of weeks to discuss how far have we reached at each university. So we have had a research data survey now since 2018 and looked on what's happening in research data in Sweden. And rather interesting is about the discussion on the strategic level at the university management level. And half of the answers say that no, there is no discussion on the strategic level. And I think that is really needed to get things moving. So it is a gap between university management and the operational work, and it shouldn't be that. So we have to improve it in Sweden. Then working on open science, we have a lot of different groups within the Rectors Conference. So we started to have a coordination group on open science that took all the perspectives and to coordinate the different groups. So we have the research data group, we have the reference group for EOSC, we have a working group on research assessment, we have a group on beyond the transformative agreements. I think Sweden, we would like to see that the transformation will happen also within open access, and we are now stuck in the transformative agreements. But all these working groups are working together to create the discussion and to make the movement forward. So we have the national roadmap for open science. We had a guide for implementation of the national roadmap and an orientation map to help us discuss this. And I think the roadmap has really been good. It had been accepted of all universities. Many libraries are driving and different research infrastructure within the universities. We really discuss how can we make the roadmap go forward. And here is the roadmap. I won't read all this, but you can look at it then. But it's a lot about fair data, a lot about cooperation, to work international, to have the research and education environment that is promoting open access, and definitely to build the infrastructure and work together with all the stakeholders. So one of the parts that is Lars said that I will talk a little bit about is S&D, the Swedish National Data Center. And that is a national infrastructure for making research data accessible nationally as well as internationally. And it is a consortium of 9 universities. And the host is Gothenburg University here in Gothenburg. We have also a network of another 23 higher education institutions and 3 research authority organizations to work within this consortia and within S&D. So it is a collaboration. The consortia, it's funded by the Swedish Research Council, and it's a collaboration between 9 universities that govern S&D. They contribute with expertise in different scientific fields or domains. We have domain specialists at each university to help the researchers within their domain, and development efforts to promote the national work with open access to research data. And then we have all other higher education institutions that had joined S&D to learn together and to evolve the work on open data and data structure. So what does S&D offer? Support for open access to research data through training, assistance, and technical solutions. A comprehensive national system for making research data fair. A web-based research data catalog with detailed data description where data are accessible through direct download or request. And S&D went from a traditional repository to a distributed network. It started in 1981 as a traditional repository where researchers within social science could upload and share their data. So from 2016, it developed into a consortium with a truly shared knowledge base and infrastructure within the full network. And each member serving their own researchers, including storage of data. Jointly, we developed the know-how and e-tools. Thanks to distributed system, we can also handle data with restrictions, sensitive information, and copyright and everything. So S&D is really important cooperation within Sweden to make this vision come through about data sharing and open science. And the node of RDA is within S&D as well. So after this conference, they have invited all people from Sweden to come and have eftersnack with RDA Sweden. So it's something about chit chat about how we can go forward again within the node of RDA Sweden. Then my last example is then how we go internationally, and that is the EOSC, a web of scientific insights, a web of fair data and related services, a federation of relevant existing and future data sources, a virtual space where science producers and consumers come together, an open edge range of content and services that are meeting all European data requirements, but most important as well, in interaction with other regions of the world. We shouldn't build the EOS just within Europe, but we start here with funding from the European Council, and it's a really big project. I hope you have heard about it, and it's a vision that will evolve, and it's a lot of projects now going on to build this web of fair data. So today, the EOSC Association is the voice of the community towards building EOSC, and we have about 168 members now and 81 observers, and more than 50% is from research performing organization, and then we have service provider, funders, and other organizations. But we are growing stronger and stronger in Europe to make the voice for the researchers into how to build EOSC. And the EOSC strategy, this is something where the board of EOSC worked on to get a strategy, how we move on from 2022 and what it is, why we're doing it and how. And here we have infrastructure, people, and research data results. So this is important thinking how we can go forward. And in Sweden, we have EOSC in all countries in EU and associated countries. But in Sweden, we have had a little bit of another tradition, as we have worked a lot of discussed how can we work with EOSC. We have all the big universities are members of EOSC, and compared to the other Nordic and Baltic countries, they have chosen to have one institution. I think Norway now has more members within it, but I think EOSC has been a good meeting place for us to discuss the development internationally, and then we have ways to go together. So in Sweden, we work top down, we follow the politics, but we also definitely work bottom up within S&D, and then we work top down and bottom up within building the EOSC together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wilhelm. Thank you. And there is time for a few questions. So before the coffee break, so maybe we have some, yeah, a question there. Yeah, a mic is coming.
Hi, Herman. I'm currently in industry, so that's not important anymore. First of all, I would like to say congratulations on 10 years. I think the impact we've had as a global organization is much more than we dreamt of. And it's really, even if it's small steps, it's really a big thing that we've managed to do these things. Anyway, that being said, I had a question for Wilhelm, which you mentioned this yearly survey, right? And you showed the data for. Are there trends in there? Is it improving or is it stable?
Yes, it is improving, and it's good. I think the first year it wasn't improving at all, but now when we start to work together with the roadmap and we have the discussion, we have made the discussion on the top level and people really working on it. So yes, we get better results year from year. So now we will change the survey because it's no use to make those questions we have done before.
Do we have any more questions in the room? Yes.
I have a wish. My name is Ingrid Constanze Odegaard from GESIS in Cologne.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. And I have the issue, and you mentioned it, Rene, the non-profit organizations. I tell you, here in this room, we all know and we all like sharing. But one of the other things, when you talk about competitive advantage, they do a lot of research. And if you try to get data and you try to, get them to get the idea of sharing the data that they use, they are probably or still in totally different spheres than we are. So my wish for the future of the RDA would be not just moving forward to the industry and the corporations, but maybe we can get them on board too, because we were going to need them in order to solve the grand challenges of the future. And I'll be happy to be part of that.
So if anyone wants to comment, Hillary or anyone else in the panel?
Well, yes, of course, part of our new announcement that we had at the end of last year, and which is starting is our first real collaboration with industry for the benefit, we hope, of the community. So I hope it's the first of many. But I agree with you, Ingvild, that this could be a very good collaboration and a means forward, because we do need to identify ways of supporting and funding for the benefit of those
different geographical regions, but also different types of organizations and stakeholders. So I join you in that wish, and thank you for raising it.
Thank you. So let's see if we have anything more in the room. If not, do we have any questions from, yeah, it's one more here. Yep, please.
On the front row.
Definitely the front row. I have a question for the Indonesian speaker whom I met yesterday. So very, very nice to hear the talk. I'm interested in the footprint of the international organizations in Indonesia and other such countries, and how, whether there's any movement towards gathering the data together, the Nagoya Protocol sort of approach, and how the RDA could possibly, have you got any ideas of how the RDA could help with that process?
Yeah. For the international organizations perspective, that Indonesia do have a covered national regulation on that, and we do acknowledge how Indonesian researchers can work together with international researchers, and then they collaborate and also produce data. But also, of course, there should be a contract or transfer agreement contract that need to be discussed together. Of course, because Indonesia has data policy, and also the other countries or institutional has their own data policy. There should be any discussion on that too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do we have any questions online?
Yes, we have a question from Luis Retanan. How does the current geopolitical landscape is affecting the development and future prospects of open science? Can international scientific cooperation be balanced with national security concerns? The current competition between US and China is already posing a challenge to international scientific collaboration and to some extent to the overall philosophy of open science.
So this is, of course, a big question. Who wants to start and talk about this? Anyone dares?
Well, I think it's really important that we don't stop talking about open science and work for open science. It's really, even though it's political, that you try to, in some way, close down the countries and keep your science within your results within the countries. But I don't think that, I think the moment is too strong that we want science to help democracy, science to get a better world. So I think that open science will overlive these political tragedies that is happening in the world right now.
Anyone else wants to comment?
Yeah, I think we don't have to solve everything all at once, you know, and it can be actually quite overwhelming if you think about it from that perspective. And that really, for me, RDA provides that umbrella of coming together and trying to make the steps that we need to solve that bigger problem. So start small. Start with what we can do now, today.
And a personal comment is that RDA has an advantage, perhaps, because it's a community. It is not driven by any political agendas. It's a community of members. Any more comments there? Do I have any more questions from either remotely or here? Yeah, one more.
Hi, my name is Edith Herzog, and I'd like to ask a question to the two gentlemen who represent the top-down, being a leaders of the university and being a leader in the EOSC. I'd like to ask you the question which Kennedy raised. I think that it's important that what RDA can do for you, but my question that how do you think that you can help this grassroots movement? So what the organizations can do to support the grassroots? And I ask this question because yes, we have 13,000 members, but we have millions who would be interested. So we are talking about the time scale, the 10 timers. So how we can make the 10 timers with the leadership of the organization to support the grassroots and not only follow the policies by the policymakers. Thank you.
So Lars or Wilhelm?
Well, I think I can start. I think also what Willem discussed before was that we need both the top down and also bottom up. I think it's we need some structure in the organizations, and structure can be given by a top down approach, where you have a structure where the bottom up can actually use contribute from the bottom up. And so I think what in those organizations, research performing organization and the leadership, I think it's really important that one embraces the bottom up and also make it clear what are the processes for how to do the bottom up, so it actually leads and comes to the top of the organization, where you can form policies, where you can provide funding and various things. So I think those two things goes extremely well together, but we need both actually.
Yes, we can't just have the top down. It's really important why we are doing this. But I think it's important with policies and that the university management say, we will provide this. And then that the bottom up can say now, okay, you say you will provide it, do it then. Build Chalmers e-commons or something. And most important is that we don't stuck in policies, that we are getting the work done, and we can't get the work done without the bottom up.
Thank you very much. And I think actually we will end with that. So we started 2 minutes late. Now we will end 2 minutes late, and we have a coffee break. And there's a special anniversary muffin served to all of you at the coffee break. So thank you very much. Thanks to the speakers and